For me, this is a fun thing because I get to welcome some people back with me. And this afternoon, you'll meet some of them. The first is Livia Aninosanu. Close, right? Yeah. Livia was here at St. Rose for 4 months a few years ago with the International Research and Exchange Program, and she reminded me that she worked on a project before us in Hudson Falls. We have a project at the Hudson Falls City School District that, among other things, deals with issues related to bullying and early pregnancy in women and all kinds of interesting things. And Livia was a great addition to that project, and I told her today it's still on, so if she wants to come back to work, she can do that. Livia is the program director for the Center for Partnership and Equality in Bucharest, one of my favorite places, and I want to welcome Livia back to St. Rose.
Hi everyone. Thank you for attending the presentation. I'm Livia, and as Rich said, I work as a program director and senior gender expert at the Center for Partnership and Equality in Bucharest, Romania. I've been there since 2002, since the organization started. And what we mainly do is to promote gender equality and to work for women in Romania. We implement several programs that are related to education, tackling lately not only gender but also issues relating to ethnicity and disability. And we're also working on trafficking in women and girls. We're working on violence against women. We're working on making sure women's rights are respected at the workplace, and working with unemployed women and women at risk. We also started recently a bakery where we only employ single mothers and mothers who have over 2 or 3 children and who are having difficulties in finding a workplace. This is our major programs. And today I will introduce a little bit our work related to trafficking in women and girls. We have a project which is called Girl, as you will see later on. But before starting talking about addressing the issue and starting talking about trafficking, I would like for us to look at a documentary movie that we produced in 2012. It is based on 7 testimonials of victims of trafficking, women victims of trafficking. We will only be looking at 2 of those due to the time, but the full documentary is online for you to watch if you would like to. So we'll do that for about 12-14 minutes, and then we will come back to the presentation. Thank you.
Prima cireașă ce se făcea era a mea, prima nucă, prima caisă, prima orice era a mea.
Bine, aveam un singur bubușe care mi-a dăruit tatăl meu la vârsta de 1 an.
Un ursuleț cu care mult timp dormeam. Dar nu, dragul moșule, cânta aia alumerul la bunicul. Și mergea cântând alumerul toată ziua.
Era să devin o doctoriță. De ce? Pentru că îmi place să ajut oamenii foarte mult când au nevoie de ajutor, să le pot oferi. Eu, de când eram în clasa 1, vreau să fac profesoară. Am avut o învățătoare care era o persoană foarte bună și bunica s-a îmbolnăvit și se tot plângea că se cumpără medicamentele, că... Și am zis, lasă bunică, cresc eu și mă fac farmacistă și stau medicamente gratis toată viața.
Am vrut să mă fac tot din profesoară. Acum sper că fetița noastră încă o să nu mai departe, pentru că și are același vis.
s-a despărțit când aveam 3 ani și mai când s-a recăsătorit. Am fost tot ok, am și un frățior, de atunci am început și problemele. Când aveam 5 ani, mai când m-am născut și, bineînțeles, nefiind copilul teatrului în vitre, am început să se facă mici diferențe, care pe mine mă deranja foarte tare. Dacă nu aveam două copii, nu am fost acceptată oricum de familie, fiindcă nu eram băiat. Și acolo peste cupă de la 16 ani am făcut-o, cum se zice. Am rămas însărcinată. Am făcut un bijutaj. Taică nu mi-a plecat aflat. Este o ceartă oribilă. Și atunci a zis la maică-mea că alege sau curba de fiecare ta sau nu. Și maică-mea nu a zis nimic. Și atunci am zis că nu, ok, rămâi cu ei și am plecat. Am ajuns într-o altă localitate, am angajat și faptul că nu prea ieșeam prea multă oră pe zi. Eram foarte interiorizată, eram foarte nu aveam nici pe maică mea să o sun și mi-a făcut foarte mult să vorbesc cu ea. Și așa, într-o seară îmi zice o colegă, hai să ieșim. În cercul respectiv era și un tip și am spus tot. Am stat la cafea, am mers acasă și am sunat telefonul ulterior. Salut! Eu sunt. Vin, tipul era din localitate, era de la câteva sute de kilometri și mă întorc în oraș dacă vrei să ieșim la o cafea. Am ieșit la cafea, vesteam ca de prieten, parcă niște ani de o viață. Dar așa am fost tot băgatele de probleme și vreau foarte îngrijorată pe mine de sănătatea mea. În primul rând știa că stau singură și că vreau nu eram foarte săcuță cu primarea și mă sună dimineața. Ai mâncat, mă stătea cu mine la telefon și ce-a stat cu message, stau tu, dai ceva. Nu, ok, eram așa, ce tare că în sfârșit cineva se gândește la mine și am o răbdare fenomenală. 6 luni de zile, mai mult de 6 luni de zile, 6-7 luni de zile, venea o dată, la 2 zile, dacă nu chiar în fiecare zi, în toate afacerile lui, tot, și legal, și ilegal, și tot ce făcea. Și asta m-a făcut să fac încredere. Și ajunsesem să povestesc tot ce mi s-a întâmplat. Știa că mă vorbesc mai mei, știa că chiar îmi dădea sfaturi. N-ar fi mai bine să o sun pe maică ta, să-și cer scuze, că familia e mai importantă. Și nici măcar nu știu dacă am îndrăgostit de sau nu. Era simplu fapt că era siguranță cea care nu știu. Nu aveam. Și într-o parte am zis că nu se mai poate. Stăteam pe un sărar de mizerie, lucram ca eroi. Și am găsit o agenție în localitatea respectivă și făcea recrutări pentru babysitting în străinătate. Toată faza era că trebuia să plătești 200 de euro să fii înscris în program și îl sun pe prietenul meu și zic, uite ce vreau să fac. Și mi-a zis, uite, dacă vrei, eu la vară plec în țară, mă duc la niște prieteni de familie care sunt proaspeți. Am un copil mic și ar avea nevoie de cineva să stea cu copilul. Ar fi avantajos și pentru tine, pentru că nu mai plătești suma aceea și nu știu ce, dar a fost tot o alegere n-am. El a zis, dacă vrei să mergi în agenție, e ok, dacă vrei să fii cu mine și mai ok, facem un prieten. Asta și m-am gândit și le-am sunat, am ajuns acolo, într-adevăr era o familie cu un copil mic. Fiind vineri, nu am povestit nimeni nimic cu mine, mă gândeam că e weekend și oricum tipul respectiv îmi zisese că până intru în job, o să mai stau pe acolo câteva zile, nu mai plimbăm, nu mai vedem împrejurările. Și într-o dimineață zice, nu mergem să vedem să niște orășele de aici prin zonă și mergem să vedem împrejurimile. Vii cu noi sau rămân acasă? Nu rămân acasă, vin cu voi. Adică ți-au intrat într-o așa un tip, hai că tu vii cu mine că nu mai este loc în mașina cealaltă. Și nu, ok, hai că mergem. Am ajuns deja să înserasem și totuși nu apar și ei. M-a sunat tipul respectiv și zice, uite, am avut un accident, nu mai ajungem în seara asta și stai liniștită, vă luați camere la hotel și ne cazăm, amândoi în aceeași cameră. Și eram totuși, ce ai, cum? Este un singur pat? Da, uite care e de fapt faza, s-a plătit o sumă de bani, s-a cheltuit o sumă de bani ca să ajungi aici și o să trebuiască să o dai înapoi. Că nu lucrezi. Nu, de fapt tu lucrezi. De mâine intri la lucru. Unde? Păi uite, este tot un mișoară ce preia telefoanele și tu o să-ți vină client și bănuiesc că știi ce ai de făcut. Am rămas așa. Masca. Ce eu o să fiu în permanență cu tine? Dacă vrei să suni la poliție sau ceva, nu trebuie. Mafia ne ține spatele, avem contacte și poliție și degeaba, tot o să înțelegi. Și tot așa, 2 zile, toate ce? Când a venit un client, el ieșea, îmi spunea că vine în hotel, ieșea să plimba prin hotel până a plecat. Eu am crescut mai mult cu bunicii mei. Părinții mei au despărțit când eram mică. O perioadă am stat la bunici, după care m-a crescut tatăl meu, cu care am o relație foarte bună. Și pot să zic că am avut o copilărie fericită. Când aveam 11 ani, mama mea a murit. Anturajul a contat foarte mult în asta, pentru că într-o zi ieșeam în oraș cu prietenii noștri și la un moment dat eram în fața blocului și a venit un tip, un bărbat mai în vârstă, după care a zis că o să meargă și el cu mine în oraș. A mers, la un moment dat a spus că merge mai întâi să mâncăm la un restaurant, după care mă întoarce acasă. Am mers la acel restaurant. După un timp am plecat spre casă, eu pe drumul principal, au pornit printr-un loc pe unde era un întuneric. La un moment dat s-au operit, a început să vorbească foarte urât, să devină violent și m-a dus într-un loc și m-a violat. În momentul acela eu am început să plâng și mi-a spus că, deși plâng, nu are niciun rost și chiar dacă mă duce la poliție, nu o să-i facă nimic, pentru că am mai fost și alte fete în situația mea și, deși au fost la poliție, nu s-a întâmplat nimic. Și am ajuns acasă. Nu m-am gândit niciodată să-i spun tatălui meu despre ce s-a întâmplat, pentru că în acel moment mi-era foarte rușine și oricum, deși știam că este un lucru rău, mă gândeam că totuși a trecut și nu mă așteptam să mi se întâmple ceva mai rău de atât. Într-una din zile, dimineața, când mă mergeam spre școală, a oprit o mașină în dreptul meu, acest bărbat a coborât din mașină și a deschis ușa din spate și m-a împins în mașină, după care a urcat lângă mine. Eu, în momentul
La un moment dat, pe drum, a scos un cuțit care se juca doar ca să mă intimideze și să mă sperie. Într-un final am ajuns la un hotel unde m-au obligat să țin raportul sexual cu mai mulți bărbați. La un moment dat vorbise cu cineva ca să mă duc într-o altă țară. Pe suma de 2000 de euro. Dar nu a mai fost posibil pentru că eram căutată de poliție și nu putea să mă scoată din țară.
So these are just two of the 7 stories, as I said, presenting two different situations. We have been working on issues related to trafficking in women and girls, in Romanian women and girls since 2009. And what I will present next will be the results of a research that we performed recently. A research where the respondents were both professionals closely working with women and girls who were trafficked, even as case managers or police officers in investigating cases of trafficking, or social assistants and psychologists, but also we're looking at interviews that we made with women who were subjected to trafficking themselves. Why introducing this data and why is it important for us to work on? Well, mainly because Romania is one of the major source of, the major origin country for victims of trafficking for sexual exploitation. And the majority of victims in the European women are women and girls. We can see some statistics, some official statistics provided by the European Union, but also we can look at statistics provided by our anti-trafficking agency in Romania, which shows that, again, victims of Romanian origin as well are mainly women and girls. And what we can see is that for some years the number of girls who were trafficked was actually higher, the percentage was actually higher than the one of women. So this is something that is reflected not only in the official statistics, but also in the interviews with professionals. Some of them also stating that they see a connection between the very low age at the moment of trafficking and the very high income that that person, that girl, brings for the trafficker, as there is a very, very high request for girls who are younger and younger. And social assistants and case manager talk about girls that they work with and who already at 12 years old have been recruited and trafficked for a couple of years. The major risk age being 14 to 17 years old. The project is, as you can see, funded by the Prevention and Fight Against Crime program of the European Union, and it's implemented in 3 countries. In Romania as a country of origin, as well as in Italy and Spain as the 2 main countries of destinations for Romanian women victims of trafficking. This project has a new component to it because we were focused especially on tackling the issue from a gender perspective. We try to look at it through the lenses of gender, and we will later on speak about the findings that we have on this issue. We try to understand better what is behind, if there are things that are considered to be vulnerability risks for the women and girls who are trafficked. And one of them is obviously poverty and lack of opportunities in their country of origin. We have a quote here from one of the women we interviewed, and she had a history where her parents were unemployed after the fall of communism. Their factory was the factory they used to work at was closed, so they were left unemployed with no source of income, and also with let's say mental fragility, with a risk of mental illness, which actually happened in their case. They became extraordinarily poor. They lost their family support, and they lost also the support of the social support that they had, the network of friends. So when the father, the girl said, was able to work as selling newspapers, he was able then to buy bread for the family. And when that didn't happen, all she could eat was salt and drink water. And this story actually was happening in Bucharest, in the capital, not as we would imagine, in a very small city with not so many opportunities. But the thing is that the combination of poverty and unemployment and depression due to all of this status led them to becoming really alone in this as a family. And the girl also was alone in trying to make sense of what was going on in her life, in their family life. Many of them also talk to us about the challenges that are specific to teenage years. The way they travel through their teenage years, and how the conflict that they feel inside between still being a child and having the needs of a child, the need of care from their parents, as well as on the opposite side, the need of being independent, being an independent person, and actually going against your parents and gaining more strength of yourself, can actually impact this and increase the risk. And if to this we also add the need to belong to a social group, then for some of them this was actually the trigger. This was the problematic age, which is also considered to be the highest risk age. Obviously, negative and discriminatory experiences on the labor market. Very low wages for people who do not have an education, and actually even for people who do have an education, but also experiences of discrimination, such as getting fired while you are pregnant, or not being taken back after you come from maternity leave, things that are obviously illegal in Romania, but still continue to happen. This was another risk factor. And also experiences of isolation, marginalization, and multiple discrimination, especially in women and girls who are facing multiple discrimination. And in this regard, women and girls of Roma ethnicity are one of the main targets. We also looked at family-related vulnerabilities, and we have seen once again that we cannot link under no circumstances the structure of the family with a higher vulnerability risk. We cannot say that single mothers or single parent families bring a higher risk, or that families or the children who are raised by grandparents have a highest risk. It is not the structure, no matter how the structure is. What actually represents a vulnerability factor, it is the relationship, the way they relate to each other in the family, and the way the family supports or does not support the child growing up. We have seen in their families, in several cases, dysfunctionalities and the lack of healthy relationships. Also, sort of a lack of stability and sort of a difficulty to connect to a parental figure. And lack of physical presence or emotional availability was another thing that was that we discovered in the research. And a lot of parents who went to work abroad and were not completely able to manage the communication between themselves and the child who stayed behind at home. And also some of the women we interviewed reported the lack of sense, the lack of meaning, or the difficulty to make sense of life and of different situations in the absence of a strong, of an adult with a strong support for the child, who actually helps the child to make meaning, to make sense. Different types of violence, from physical violence to emotional violence to sexual violence, obviously. And also what we have seen in many cases was the struggle of explaining transgenerational violence, a struggle to make sense of why the violence was happening in the family. And if we look at one of the quotes, it says that, well, my mother used to beat me, but my mother's father used to beat her so much harder, so my mother is a better mom, actually, for just not doing the same level of abuse to me. Traumatic attachment is, again, something that could be a vulnerability factor, especially because we've seen it repeated in different relationships in the lives of these women and girls, and somehow the compromises become frequent, and the relationships are somehow marked by these kind of compromises that they have to make. And many of them, actually, from a very young age, had adult-like responsibilities. They were taking care of younger brothers, they were taking care of younger sisters, they were working in jobs that we would seriously look at as formalized job, even if they were illegally doing it because they had no contract and it was illegal to employ a minor, obviously. Traumatic events, like in the first case where the mother got sick and died and the father killed himself, or the experience of homelessness, especially in cases of domestic violence where the mother and children had to run away from the home and were able to stay for brief periods of times at friends or in different shelters, but only for a brief period of time, which created a whole lack of stability in their lives. And professionals also mentioned that in the common history is usually impacted by sexual violence, this being a very important thing, and especially sexual violence that is improperly addressed. Like we have seen in the second testimonial, the young girl who was raped and she had no possibility to talk about it. She didn't even consider as an option going and talking to the father due to the shame, as she said, which is strong, still very, very strong in communities in Romania. We also looked at recruitment a little bit, and we saw that as opposed to the period when Romania was not part of the European Union, now the networks of traffickers are smaller and much smaller than before, less organized, and are much more family-based. So different members of the family have a role in the recruitment process. But also, we looked at the fact that they know each other, this being another trend. Sometimes the recruitment is made by a friend, by a neighbor, by somebody the girls or the woman knows, and to a certain level trust. So there is a guarantee in the relationship. Also, some of the professionals mentioned the fact that some of the traffickers go in really small, depressed communities where opportunities are lacking, and somehow they seem frozen in time. And they go there showing so much wealth that they have made working abroad, that they really impress people who are actually desperate to find work and to support their families. As I said, there is a connection, there is a relationship, and one other trend that has been stable for the past years is the lover-boy trend, which I don't know if you're familiar with. It's the situation in which the recruiter is actually the partner, the boyfriend, the fiancé, who does that either by completely misleading the girl, or by telling her that this is temporary and that she actually needs to sacrifice herself for the better of the couple and of the family and for their future. It is very, very frequent, and we have seen in the first video that we've seen, we have seen in fact a kind of strategy. He was not her boyfriend; he was her friend. They were not boyfriend girlfriend at the time, but what we have seen there is very, very similar to the approach that the lover boy uses, and this is working in a way in which the relationship fulfills some very old and very basic needs. As if you remember, the girl was saying, he called me, he asked me, have you eaten? Are you okay? Did you take care of your health? Cut a piece of food and let me hear you eating it. So this kind of care is actually less specific to a couple relationship, but much more specific to a parent-child relationship at a certain point in development, and that is very attractive and very seductive for someone who did not have that ever in her past, because if we remember the context in which that woman was, it was a very distant relationship with her, and a very traumatic for her relationship with her family. So sometimes we see that the recruiters and the exploiters are really emotionally intelligent and know exactly which buttons to press and which messages to send out, fulfilling like really important needs for the women and girls. Another situation that we have seen was that recruitment is based on a really strong need. And if you remember the situation that I was describing before of the women running away with their children from cases of domestic violence, running away from abusers, this is the case of one of the girls for which having an apartment was a very important dream, because for her it not only meant stability, but it also meant like the end. She was projecting it as the end of being on the run and finally having a home, finally having a place where you feel secure. So she was doing that for actually having a house, and the trafficker met her with a seller, with an apartment seller in a bar, and they closed a fake contract. She didn't know it was fake, but the money she was making every month were going to the trafficker, and the trafficker said that he's paying her monthly loan for the apartment. So she knew that this is what's going on, that okay, she will do this for a longer period of time just to pay more and more for her apartment. And obviously when police came in and took her out of exploitation, they told her her contract for the apartment was fake, and was always fake actually, and that she didn't have it. In terms of exploitation, it happens in various places, on the street, in apartments, in massage salons, in night bars, in clubs, and the control is present. Even if several studies say that the control is less, and we do also believe that there is less control as opposed to the period when Romania was not a EU country. What we see is control that is more subtle, and that is somehow appears through the listening of the phone calls, or through control over the money, the clients that they can or not take, and so on. And even sometimes the trafficker, when they go back home and they want to visit the family, the trafficker goes with them and stays there during the visit for the whole period of time. We also have some cases of taking the papers away, but also we have many situations in which the women describe the fact that they were given drugs and they become addicted to drugs, which, as one of the women interviewed describes there, is actually a very good way of control in itself, because the woman who needs the drugs no longer wants her share of the money, but she's only interested in having that. We looked at some of the consequences of trafficking, and we looked at the levels of impact it had on their lives, and we saw a lot of issues in further relationships. Even long after exiting the trafficking situation, they still have much hardship in entering relationships and in continuing their lives. And also, we've seen attempts to end their lives, and we've seen sleep disorders and eating disorders, anxiety disorders, and so on. A lot of things that they have to handle. And also, we had a quote from one of the women who was, in fact, talking about the constant risk of victimization, mainly talking about how she said, you know, you look at me and you think I'm normal, and you think that just because I look okay and I'm dressed fine, you think that I've overcome that part, but that part is actually inside of me, and I know that I'm always at risk, and for me it's always a daily struggle. Day after day I have to actually make a conscious decision not to enter an unhealthy relationship and not to go back to that. So she says, you know, not even my family understands this. They pity me, but they can't understand. Only people who still work in this field can. We looked at gender and trafficking as well, and we have seen how much influence the process of trafficking is by the social and community perceptions on the sexuality of women and girls and the bisexual violence. And there is unfortunately still, even if when we look at violence and sexual violence, the cases are similar to other countries. What is more in our case is a higher tolerance for that, and a lack of services that could be available for them in order to support them to exit those situations. Unfortunately, we don't have sufficient sex education in schools. In many communities, sexuality is still taboo, and there is a strong pressure on women and a very conflictual pressure. On one side, they are encouraged by the media and by the products that are shaped for them to be more sexual, to be sexy, to be attractive. On the other side, they are deeply sanctioned by their communities if they adopt this way of being. We have actually made an assessment of the main newspapers, and we analyzed over 30,000 articles last year, trying to understand how the media sends out messages to teenagers, teenage girls especially. And we have seen a lot of emphasis on how to look, and how every part of your body defines you, and every piece of clothing you put on yourself defines you, and how you should always look your best and always put a lot of interest in that. And then we compared what the media provides with their interest expressed in an anonymous way on forums for teenagers. And there we have seen a lot of requests about situations in which they're depressed, or they have anxiety, or they're having issues at school, or they're bullied or discriminated against. So somehow there is a huge gap between their needs and actually what they're getting through these channels. There are many cases in which the communities do not properly address sexual violence. We've had several examples in Romania. Sadly, a case that made the newspapers almost every day last year, in which seven men raped a young woman, and I won't get into the details of the case. What I want to say is that at the tribunal where their case was judged, they were taken interviews by the media, and many of them were saying, you know, that was not rape, that was surprise sex, or they were saying, you know, it's very hard and very unfair to get so much punishment, so many years of prison for something that lasted so short. So the punishment, the sanction should actually be equal to the minutes of pleasure. So these are somehow the things that impacts so much the cases of trafficking, and also the making of justice and them actually recuperating their rights in this process. Communities, we worked at community level, and somehow it seems that a success case, if I can call it a success, is if the family is able to hide the fact that the girl was trafficked from everybody in the community. So this somehow shameful and hurtful secret does not get out, because if it gets out, then the door is open to an incredible amount of judging and finger pointing and victim blaming. This is still going on, and unfortunately it impacts justice in many, many cases. Also, we looked at their perceptions on femininity and masculinity, and they spoke to us about the portrait of the mother who sacrifices herself and who takes a lot of abuse, but she's able to be strong for the family. And this is actually a model that young girls admire too, the strength of a mother who can stay there for keeping the family together, which is an unfortunate model, sadly. And also they spoke about how hypocritical and how very different the views on sexuality of men and of women are, and how a woman with multiple sexual partners is seen in a very bad manner and very much judged by the community, while a man is actually glorified for that. And also they spoke about different treatment for girls and boys, or women and men in the same family that they witnessed. We also looked at groups at risk, and these are the main group at risk pointed out for us by the professionals that we interviewed. Children who do not have a home, people with disabilities and psychiatric diagnoses, young people raised within the child care system, young women and men from marginalized communities and of Roma ethnicity, children and adults who already have victimization experiences, and undocumented immigrants. What do we do except for research? How do we work in order to do prevention? Because we have spoken so much yesterday and today about the importance of understanding and preventing such cases from happening again. And I'm giving a few examples from a campaign that we have done in 2012, and we're actually restarting. We have restarted it. It's a campaign that we're doing in both rural and urban areas, in the main cities of Romania, on the basis of, because what you've seen so far, the images seen so far, are actually drawing and paintings made by victims of trafficking during the art therapy sessions in their rehabilitation process. So what we do is make an exhibition with paintings that they made, which we install in the center, in the public space, in the center of the city, and it has next to it quotes, and it's organized such as you can see the life before, and then how the recruitment was, and how the exploitation phase was, and how they exited the trafficking situation, and what they're doing now, and future plans. So it's like a journey that the visitors take, and they are taken in this journey by people who are experts, who know a lot of things about this and who can support them and support their understanding and answer their questions. But also, so these are from the cities, and also you can see some of the women living messages, support and encouragement messages for women and girls who experience trafficking and who are sexually exploited. And this is the second part of our prevention campaign, and what we do is work in the rural areas this time at a community level, and what we're trying to do is go to a small village and try to raise awareness of trafficking, working with three main target groups: children from 12 to 14 years old, so just before the highest risk age. But also we're working with the parents of those children, and not at least with everybody who has a position in the community. And by this I mean the social assistant, the kindergarten teacher, the teacher in the school, the doctor, the priest, everybody who could be a key person in spreading the information and in understanding the phenomenon and sort of making the community aware and providing information and support further on. With children, we don't work specifically on trafficking, saying this is trafficking, but rather we work with their understanding of a safe community and their needs of having a safe community and their needs from the adults and what would support them to feel safer and to feel better and happier in their communities. And they sometimes give us amazing ideas that we go on and present later on and talk with adults and with the authorities, which are brought together. And sometimes they don't believe us. Sometimes they think that their children are not aware of those issues, and their children, who are sometimes 12, 13 and 14, the group that we work with, they cannot, have such a deep view of the community issues as into telling us what the problems are. But then they discover and they actually accuse us of, manipulating them and telling them what to say, the children. But then they discover something so specific about their community, which is in the messages that come from the children, that they cannot continue to believe because we don't know, we cannot know that specific issues. So then they are amazed of the high level of understanding of the issues of the community that the children have and how many needs the children actually have. We see here some of the messages I will translate for you. We need you to become better people, or protect us as we are, or I need to learn new things. Please help me. Thank you. I want to do something that I like, to do a job that I like. We need more love. And in order to carry on, we need your help. In order to continue our life, we need goodness from you. We love you. We need the love that you have for us. I want a better life. I want a life that is happy. Give us advice without judging us. We want to be accepted. And not at least mama, that appears a lot. The need of connection, mother, mama is mother, the need to connect more, and many times when they reunite children and their families, this ends with hugs and really they connect more than on a regular basis. Here we have some messages for adults to respect us, to have a room where we can practice sports, to encourage us, for them to have a good relationship, for the parents not to fight, and to support us when we are in danger, to help us when we are in danger. So we worked in communities with this aim of not only preparing them for having more information, but also decreasing their perception or their beliefs that in cases of sexual violence it's always women's fault and there is always something that they did, and the whole attention usually is misplaced and is taken from the aggressor and put on the victim, something that I'm sure you are familiar with here as well, and actually it's a global phenomenon. It's not something that only impacts my country or the countries in my region.
Thank you, Livia, for